You're listening to Oh My Health, There Is Hope podcast.
When your heart is aching and your world is shaking, don't give up. No, no, don't give up.
Hello and welcome to Oh My Health, There Is Hope. I'm your host, Jana Short, and today we're here with Clarissa Kristjansson. Clarissa is an internationally recognized midlife and menopause transition coach and mentor. She helps women who are transitioning into midlife learn how to use holistic, mind-body practices to manage their symptoms, regain confidence, and experience a new sense of freedom and energy. She is also the host of Thriving Through Menopause podcast, a keynote speaker and best-selling author. Thank you so much for being with us today, Clarissa.
Hey, Jana, I'm so excited to be here and to share my story with your listeners.
Yeah, because that's the first thing we ask you is to share your story, because I am a believer of our stories and our journeys are so powerful. When we share those with others, it really starts putting this ripple effect of hope out in the world. So can I have you share your story with us today?
Absolutely. Well, menopause, when we say that word, some of us go, huh? A little bit. And we know kind of intellectually what it is. But if you were like I was, I didn't know much more than that. Our mothers didn't talk about menopause. And so there I was. I was about 43 years old. And I recently emigrated to Australia at that time. I was living in the UK and I'd had a big move. Unfortunately, I'd lost my mother and my marriage had ended. And I thought I would try my luck on the other side of the world from the UK to Australia with a 7-year-old and a crazy dog in tow. And I started to, a few years in, have problems sleeping. I became very anxious and I noticed that I was putting on a lot of weight. And when I went to my doctor, I didn't receive a very sympathetic response. I got actually a very interesting one from the healthcare provider, which was, I suspect you're one of those women that stands in the supermarket queue and eats chocolate. And I was like, no, I'm confused. But the word menopause or perimenopause never came up in the conversation. You would have thought that a woman who was presenting with all these kinds of symptoms would have got some questioning. I was mid-40s, but nothing. And it kind of kept on going on like that until I changed job. And I moved from one company to a different company, and it was very tough there, really, really tough. Like, I'd worked in international firms and suddenly there I was in a really strong Australian culture, which I wasn't accustomed to, even though I had Australian friends and that. And about 3 months into the job, I'm thinking, I can't do this. I really and truly can't do this. And I got a new boss. And the story goes that is this, that after the first week, I was reporting to a very senior manager and he hadn't spoken one word to me. He was new and I thought, gosh, maybe he doesn't realize I report to him. And so, you make good plans. You're a senior manager yourself. And I thought, when I see him, I'm going to say, hi, I'm Clarissa. I'm in your team. Maybe we should have a meeting. But I had a full-blown panic attack, which I didn't realize was part of the anxiety had built up in menopause. And we stepped out of 2 separate lifts into the office lobby in Sydney. And this panic attack overtook me. I have no idea to this day what I actually said to him. I presume some garbled word came out. And I couldn't really breathe. It was like an out-of-body experience. It was actually very frightening. And he looked at me and he said, oh, did you run up the stairs? Maybe you need to take a rest. And just turned and went into the office. And I was in so much shock and emotional pain because I thought, gosh, maybe he doesn't think I'm any good. Maybe they're going to get rid of me. I really had these racing, unnatural thoughts and all the concern about being a single mother and, what was going to happen to me and what was going to happen to my child. And I just took the lift back down to the lobby and I just collapsed in tears. I didn't know where to go or how I was going to move my life forward. I felt really trapped and really lost, and I was feeling unwell in myself, yet I couldn't probably pinpoint what it was all about. I cried on the phone to a friend out, and I went out into the street and I actually cried, and she was just very supportive. And then sometimes I think that the universe has got you back, and there was like a little flash of a thought. Oh, that woman that I'd met at some conference, she was very inspirational. There was something about her, and she'd spoken to me about something called open ground. So I turned around and went back up to the lift, up the lift into my desk, and I Googled this woman. And this thing came up, open ground. And it was actually a mindfulness training group. And I went to that group, and they lived, their headquarters was right next to where I lived in Sydney. It was like, and they had a course starting the following week. And I went there and I started to address the anxiety, the sleeplessness, the hopelessness that I felt. And suddenly I was in a community of people in this 8-week course who were going through similar experiences. They weren't menopausal like I was, but they had shared experiences, difficult experiences. And here in this group, we could talk and resolve things together. We were supported by a wonderful psychotherapist, Timothy Goddard, who remains a friend of mine to this day. And I started to notice that as I was able to practice more mindfulness, a lot of the symptoms that I now know were part of my menopause started to settle. And although they were still there, they were not as acute, because once I got that, I could sleep. And sleep, of course, allowed me to feel better about myself. I was more able to manage my anxiety. And then I went up from that space to a journey of deepening my mindfulness and compassion practices. And it was not an easy journey, but I realized that I didn't love myself very much. I was very hard on myself. I expected to achieve. It comes from a childhood of striving and achieving. And, you know, you get patted on the back for doing this. And it allowed me to journey through the remainder of my menopause. Even though I had hot flashes and things like that, I had the ability to manage these things. And it got me interested in working with women. And I started to work with women who were presenting with menopausal symptoms, with symptoms of pain, with grief, with anxiety. And in 2016, I actually researched the menopause more deeply and wrote a book. And I didn't intend to write a book about the menopause, but again, that was a very intuitive thing that I allowed my intuition to come through. And when the woman who was helping me to write my book said, "What are you going to call your book?" And I went, "Oh, it's called The Mindful Menopause." And I didn't really know where that came from. But then I was really deeply inside, understanding the menopause journey, not just as a set of symptoms that could be treated, but actually as a emotional and spiritual unfolding that we could bring a very different approach to, helping women like myself navigate this journey through a lens of mindfulness, compassion, and scientific knowledge to actually change the way that we view ourselves, view this experience, and begin to age well. And that's how I ended up really becoming a menopause coach and mentor on the back of that journey.
Wow, I love your story, because I think we've all been in your shoes at one point or another. And I recently had a woman that I was coaching show up frazzled, crying, and she says, "Sorry, I think I'm hitting menopause. I'm premenopausal." And I just started laughing, like, "Honey, you were premenopausal the day you were born." And honestly, now that you have symptoms means you're getting close to the end. So yay, welcome to the other side. But Drew, we are premenopausal from the day we're born. Our bodies are going through those phases. And when you get to the other side, I can tell you it can be joyful.
It is. It's very joyful. You're absolutely right there, Jana. There is a sense of release, and you find a new sense of energy and purpose.
I agree. You know what? I'm all for the holistic side of going into this journey and preparing for it in advance, taking care of yourself during, and making sure, because your body stops doing things that it would normally do, like just the absorption rate of certain supplements and vitamins that you would get normally in foods, it's not doing as much anymore. So there are things you can do holistically and spiritually and mentally that really, when you get there, you're like, what was I so worried about? This is awesome. I tell people all the time, my 50s, I went into menopause because I had to have a hysterectomy because I tested positive for the BRCA gene. And so I chose to do that so that every woman in my family has died from ovarian cancer. And so I decided to get ahead of it. And I wasn't having any more babies. I had 4. Actually, I think I had 5 grandchildren at the time that I did this. And it puts you into menopause right away. There's no preparing. Like, you wake up the next day and you're not producing the things that you need to produce, and there's a change. And I did mine all holistically, and it was amazing. It actually was. They scared me, telling me all these things that was going to happen, and so they put that into my mind. But I chose to readjust those in my mind and to be comfortable moving into that journey. And it was wonderful. What are some of the things that you can tell women? Let's go through the 3, like, let's pick 3 stages, like the pre, when you know you're pre, like you're pre at birth, but when you really know, like, hey, things are starting to change. My cycles are starting to change. I maybe having more difficult sleeping, or the things that you went to your doctor for, I'm starting to gain weight. And then we'll give some tips about when you're in that phase, like you're in it, right? You're running that race. And then some of the joyful things we can do after that keeps us feeling like I have more energy now than I did when I was 20. Like, honestly, I do.
I think when you're in that very early phase, it's often your moods that are so rocked. And I think that the hormones are fluctuating. It's like if you had PMS, but you've dialed it right up. And you can burst into tears, or you can feel very irritable. You can feel rage. One of my clients has described this as having red mist, and her husband goes, "Oh, it's those days, you know." It backs off from her, that which doesn't help. And I mean, we laugh, but you know, if you have a business or you have to go to work, we have to manage those moods. And that for me is one of the things, is learning to be able to step back for a bit, take some breaths, ground ourselves. And if we've had a tough day and we've unleashed something, and unfortunately we tend to unleash our horridness on our family, they become, because we don't generally scream at people in the office because we have boundaries there, but we come home and something small triggers us. I think the first thing we can do is say sorry to ourselves. You know, I'm not having a very good day, and then explain to your family what's going on, because they also need to know. And you to say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do this. This is my menopause. You know, this is how I feel, and I need you to help me. Because I don't think, if unless we are kind to ourselves and we get others to support us, that we navigate such roller coaster emotions terribly well.
That was so beautifully said, because my biggest regret through the whole journey is my children, like me snapping at them or flying off over something so silly. I was harder on me than they could have been, because then I would go to my room and cry because I saw their little faces like, what the heck? I just spilled milk. And, you know, and I'm losing my cookies. And I'd go in my room. I was so hard on myself. And you're right. We need to start saying to ourselves, it's okay. Like, it's okay. We lost it. We can fix this. I'm sorry that, you know, you're having a bad day. Now let's go out and tell them, I'm sorry that I took that on you. But that was really beautifully said. So once you get into the menopause and you're having all those massive symptoms, you can't sleep, you're having sweats, what do
I
we do?
think I think there's a lot we can do, actually. I first, I mean, I think I'd put it in a couple of pillars. I think, what can we do to support our baseline health? Because whether we choose to go through it naturally or we choose to have support from hormones, we need to have good baseline health, because when our hormones start to decline, and they are really declining, it impacts everything. It impacts our symptoms, and it impacts also on our long-term health. So for me, there's always the key ones, which is what we eat. Having a really good diet that's rich in phytonutrients will support our health a lot. So plant-based diets that have what they call phytoestrogens. So either they're estrogen-like compounds, or they're compounds that can help the body make estrogen. So the chemicals in the food can really support that and make sure that we're more balanced and we've got a healthier gut. That'll improve our moods. It'll help us to sleep. And it's good for our long-term health, because losing estrogen and progesterone affects our hearts, our bones, our brains. So we do need that. And if we're feeling a bit foggy and a bit, I can't remember, not where I lost my keys, but what you're called and why I'm in this meeting and where I'm supposed to be, or we can't get the words out, then a good base diet is going to help us be less foggy. And if it's helping us to sleep, that would help too. And move, exercise, be active. We don't have to pump it out in the gym, but being physically active every day is really important. So we're building good energy in the body, base energy, and then managing stress. Stress and menopause, as I found out, as you probably can realize, was not a good recipe for being well, because cortisol impacts both estrogen and progesterone. So it dampens them down. So whatever we have is, A, not in balance, and secondly, not at the level that it could be. Managing stress helps us to sleep better. We can rest, because when we're losing progesterone, which is a key sex hormone, that hormone has a lot to do with us feeling calm in the body. So it plays a role. And obviously, if we're losing a lot of that and we're stressed as well, it's harder for us to relax. It's harder for us to stay calm and in control and feeling well. So managing stress is so critical here. And there's so many ways we can do that. I think we can do that through yoga. We can meditate in various forms, or we can just learn to just stop and take a big, deep breath when we need it.
So everything you've said, because we're going to move into what happens after, but everything you said is key for us to be teaching our daughters, because you're right, our parents didn't speak about it. But if we start setting those key values of eating healthy, taking those moments for yourself in a young age, instilling that into them so it becomes a habit as an adult when they really need these tools a lot more, all those things that you just talked about, those two stages, when you get outside of the menopause stage and you're past those beautiful days and you're into the better, brighter days, I call them, there are other things besides that foundation that we just created for ourselves, because our bodies do need a little bit more. They don't work the same. How would you address that?
Yeah, they don't work the same. I mean, they just don't. And that's okay. I mean, I think we continue to have really good pillars of health, but I think there's a lot to do with our minds as we get older too. And I think that although we're doing all the good things and continue doing them, it is a mindset. And there is a huge journey to go to releasing and letting go of the person we once were, and allowing this new, beautiful, wiser, older woman to emerge. And that's not always that easy in today's society, where youth is overvalued and age, we think we become a bit invisible. So embracing a mindset, I like to see my clients practice beautiful rituals of letting go and letting in, and seeing ourselves as going through this transformation and allowing a new purpose to unfold. Because as we get older, what are we going to do next? What is this new stage all about? And I think those of us who are here, like yourself and myself, we found new purpose, something we really love and want to do in the next stage. And that is going to give us a different sense of energy that is so beautiful. And if we've got good foundations, then we can really reach for that.
Well, I've been a decade, I think, almost since I had my hysterectomy, and it was the best decade of my life. I'm telling you, it was phenomenal. And I'm turning 60 in just a couple months. And I'm like, I cannot wait to see what that decade has for me. Like, I'm so excited going into it. And someone was talking about wrinkles the other day, and I'm like, I like wrinkles. I remember as a little girl, my mom's friend laughed, and she had the crinkles around her eyes and on her, like the sides of her mouth. And I kept thinking, when will my laugh look like that? I can't wait.
I
And here
know.
I am.
And I turned 60 in August, so I'm just into this thing, and I'm like, wow, it's amazing. It's so uplifting and energizing and different from being 50. I think we've let our children have grown up, and suddenly, we have a different sense of freedom, and we don't have to be inside those rigid boundaries that when you're working and you have children, you have a lot of responsibility. Now we can say, well, what do I want to do? And we can do anything we like. I had one client who came to me, and she was well into her mid 50s. And she said to me, I really want to learn to horse ride. And you think, oh yeah, that's good, but lots of people were like rolling their eyes at her, and she'd been and asked, and she found somebody who was willing to teach her to ride, who happened to also be a much older person. And she bought a horse, and she found a whole new passion and purpose. So it isn't always about throwing your job up in the air and creating a new career. It can be taking up a completely new hobby that maybe you've had a yearning like she had since she was a girl. Lots of us hold that I wish I had a little pony when I was about 7 kind of thing. But we can go back and enjoy something like that when we turn 50, 60, after the menopause. The sky is really the limit. There's no limitations. That's all in your mind.
100%. For those women who are listening right now and you're hitting your 50s, girl, the doors are opening up. I got back in school. I'm studying to be a therapist. My daughters are like, why? That's 4 years of school. Why? Because I can and I want to, right? And I can do what I want. Like your world, you can recreate yourself. It's not over. It's just beginning for some of us. So, and if you can get your health in line, right, in alignment, and you start thriving through your menopause, you start thriving through whatever it is you're going through. Wow, what you can do is amazing. I want to talk a little bit about your book. What made you write that book?
I was working with a young coach, someone who's actually much younger than me, who has a very inspirational story. And she said, but your story is also inspirational. You should put that together in a book. She said, women need to know how they can live differently. And I was like, oh, okay. And then she put me in contact with a book coach. And so she really inspired me to do that. And then when I got into the book, I realized how much passion I have for this area. And I think the book lit the fire under the passion.
I love it. So you guys can grab Clarissa's book. And you have a podcast, the Thriving Through Menopause podcast, which I love. I'm sure a lot of women are scared, right? Like, that's not for me. If you are a woman and you were born, you are premenopausal. And what you learn now will help you when you arrive to that other side of the journey, right? So this podcast is for every woman. And if you're a man and you're living with a woman, she's premenopausal.
Tune in.
You might want to check out an episode or two.
Yeah, and we don't talk all doom and gloom, and we talk about a lot of things on the podcast about what it's like to be a midlife woman. So we cover all sorts of things that are very pertinent to every woman, but it gets a little sharper at this time of life. So if we've been cruel to ourselves, or we've been procrastinating, or we are looking for new ways to eat well, then podcast covers all of those things with my guests. That's what we want to do. We want to make it inclusive, because you're right. You mentioned your daughters, Jana. Well, we want our daughters to know more than we did. And we want our daughters and our granddaughters not to ask questions like, is that normal? We just want them to know and to feel this is a life stage. Yes, there may be challenges, but I know how to tackle them. I know where to go for the information. I know what questions I should be asking my healthcare provider, and I'm not alone.
I love my daughter. What my oldest daughter is going to be 42. And so she's hitting that stage, right? And she called me with a few things. I'm like, honey, I think that you maybe are getting to this point. Yay. Those symptoms mean you're getting to the end, right? Which is yay. For me, it's yay. But it was a fun talk to have with her. Like, and she's a doctor of natural medicine, so she knows. But it's so funny. Even educated women are like, "What's happening? What's happening to me?"
And I think it's because some of the things we mix them up, or we think I'm just stressed, or I'm tired, or I've been pushing it too hard for a bit, or something else, or I'm eating bad, and we don't realize how impactful this hormonal change is and how much it compounds much of the stress that women are carrying already when they get to this stage.
You know, I don't know the science behind it, but I have noticed that women are hitting that stage much younger, like where we used to hit it in our 50s, right? Now they're hitting it in their early 40s. And I don't know if it's because of diet. I don't know if it's because of environment. I really am not sure, because nobody cares enough to study that. So I'm not really sure, but it's happening much younger. Women are having their cycles much younger, and they're going into menopause much younger. And I'm not quite sure what that's all about, but it's happening at a much younger age.
It is. I think it's a combination of a lot more stress than maybe previous generations, even than our generation. We have a lot more stress. There could well be environmental factors contributing to it. And who knows what else. I was at the endometriosis conference in Sydney a few years ago, and a very eminent professor, he's one of the world's leading authorities on endometriosis, definitely was talking about diet, about stress, and these factors being contributory there as well to a very horrible illness. And he said, it's so much more than just a physiological thing that's happening to women. He said there are so many moving parts, which is making it so hard to diagnose and treat, and it's happening more and more to more younger women. And I think these things are all interconnected.
I think so too. I also noticed that when I was younger, my daughter's 42, I'm going to be 6. You can do the math. I was very young, and you could not, like, nobody was having problems with fertility. Is that your puppy?
That's my puppy. It's only Dad.
But I know that you couldn't have, like, nobody had problems with fertility. Everybody got pregnant. I made a joke that if I watched a dirty movie, I would probably be pregnant.
Yeah.
Now, so many women are struggling with fertility, and it just blows me away. Like, why are so many women now struggling? What is it is it the diet at when they're young? Is it prior to them even being born? What is happening? And it's craziness. So watching your diet, eating organic, eating plant-based is really good for you. I'm not saying you can't eat a steak if you want a steak now and then, but I try to eat mostly plant-based because I know that's where most of my nutrients are coming from.
Well, exactly. And I was just actually had a podcast interview with a leading nutritionist today, and she was really stressing plant-based, lots of start with legumes, and really that's an easy place. You don't have to get really complicated. Good fats. She talked a lot about good fats and carbohydrates being kind of mostly vegetables. And I think if we think of things like that and eat that kind of a diet, not making it too complicated, then we can do really well. And if it's organic, preferably, because there's so much toxins in food, and I think toxins in our environment, that's another key contributing factor to why our hormones are messed up, because we don't realize that the environment is full of fake estrogens, and they're in our skincare products, they're in our household cleaning products, they can be in things that we put as fire retardants on our fabrics. They're everywhere.
And that's not only affecting women, that's affecting men. There's young children now, males having breasts, like starting to get breasts. And it's because of what we're eating. So eating organic is really important. Eating plant-based, making, like you said, you can make it so simple. Doesn't mean you can't have a steak once in a while or eat something, but like my bulk is plant-based. It's, by the way, I listen to stories every day. That's my thing. I want to hear your story of hope and I want to share it with the world. And almost, I would say the running theme across stories and that hope is their diet changed their life. So when they start talking about, I started taking better care of myself, I started eating healthier and watching, what I was putting in my mouth or on my skin or, the medications I was just grabbing for, it had a running theme. Diet is a no joke. I think like it's the key to so many things going on in our lives.
I agree. I was always a good eater. I mean, I was someone who always ate very healthily. I think I grew up like that. I always cooked at home. I was probably well into my late 20s before I'd ever eaten a fast food meal, which makes a lot of people laugh because that was never part of our agenda. And I was vegetarian for quite a number of years. So diet for me was not the thing that was the biggest shift. For me, it was the management of my own stress because I was just burned all the time. And I was the hardest person on myself. As you said, you went in the room and beat yourself up. I could beat myself up about anything and everything. And I still have that tendency, that racing mind that wants to take over. And, I'm a disaster person. We go from nothing to the biggest disaster scenario. But I can see myself doing it now. There's a difference. And I have the ability to put the brakes on that one. But I was incredibly high achiever, a true perfectionist. And that was the burden that I carried, that I never thought I was good enough. I maybe even didn't say those words out loud, but I never thought I was good enough. And I was an extremely successful senior manager. I managed multi-million dollar accounts. I created ads for big brands that are still running 25 years later. So there obviously wasn't anything wrong with my ability, but I could go to that end of year performance review thinking that they were going to give me the worst grade and dismiss me, and then walk out going, oh, that was a bit different. I just didn't believe in myself, and my stress compounded all of that. And that was the journey I had to go on to change more than anything else.
So that's a perfect way to wrap this up because it is more than just one key, right? There's no one key. It's like an overall, like take care of your spirituality, take care of your mind, take care of what you're putting in your body and what you're putting out into the world for sure. I'm going to make sure that all of your amazing things are in the link so you guys can find Clarissa and you can check out her podcast. If you're a woman, check it out. Like you really should. Get involved. Don't just check it out. Start engaging with it. So we'll put all of that in there. Thank you so much, Clarissa, for sharing that story with us. It was phenomenal.
It was amazing. And thank you, Jana, for the opportunity. It was wonderful.
Thanks for listening to the Oh My Health, There Is Hope podcast. Make sure to visit Jana's website, bestholisticlife.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Google Play, or listen there so you'll never miss an episode. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if you simply tell a friend about the show, that'll help too. Let's change the world together, one health expert at a time. Looking forward to seeing you next time.